Good morning. So it's 5:02 in the morning over here, and I was just reading some articles, and it was really exciting because, as you know, during COVID, in around May of 2000, I started using treatment that wasn't really used by anyone else, and that was using JAK inhibitors to help with COVID. I used it to reduce the inflammation and allow the body to heal faster. And now, as I was reading these articles and all the pathways, I understood better the intricacies of how it works and how it was able to be effective in viral infections such as COVID. I remember when I was giving it, I was called a charlatan, and some heads at Mount Sinai Hospital were telling one of my patients who I was helping that you should run away from him. I remember it was actually Shabbat, and I came to this wonderful and famous rabbi in the community. On Shabbat they would call me. That's a big deal. They would have to ring the bell. Fortunately, I was I was up. It was I don't remember, like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I came to him, and was already late. Unfortunately, he came to ask for my help. But I was giving him the JAK inhibitors, and the inflammation was already high. So the way it works is it prevents the body from responding to certain inflammatory mediators. And the way the inflammatory mediators work, the cytokines, they also cause aging, arthritis, and diabetes, other conditions, is that they bind to the receptor, the JAK inhibitor, right? What we're trying to block with the JAK inhibitors, right? So that they bind to the JAK inhibitor, the JAK receptor. They bind to the JAK receptor on the cell. The JAK receptor then goes through some changes, like a key in a chain, like lock. Imagine yourself, like one of those games where you're trying to open those boxes, right? So it causes a change that stimulates another protein. It's called a STAT protein, which is signal transduction and activation of transcription factors, long name, whatever. And that goes into the nucleus where the DNA is, right? And it binds to the area and it tells it what it needs to produce. In this case, what is it producing? It produces inflammation. And this damage is caused by the inflammation. It causes us to feel very sick and fever. Now, if you're already taking it late and then the inflammation is really, really high, then you obviously need something to bring down the inflammation, and like steroids and other things. And if that inflammation is already so late, it's already caused damage in other organs, then obviously you need a little bit something else, which is where the immunoglobulins, where they would, as I said in March, I was suggesting that of 2000, that IV immunoglobulin, just a general IV immunoglobulin would help, but it would be better if we had the precise immunoglobulin, and that's what Regeneron was doing and was helping. Anyway, so the interesting idea is that I also gave it for people who had a reaction to the vaccine. And unfortunately, now when there are good treatments, people are still forced to take the vaccines and new vaccines. The question arises whether companies are trying to unscrupulously, or maybe they think it's the right thing to do, but mutate it, assuming they can predict how the virus would mutate, and therefore in advance produce vaccines to that mutated virus. But then again, what if that virus escapes, just like we believe it happened in China when the virus that was being experimented on got out of the lab and started spreading like wildfire. So, about 5 months ago, 3 months ago, I'm sorry, time flies. I was asked by people who have helped before with COVID to talk to a doctor in Florida, head of the ICU, who was treating their father and grandfather. I was asked by the grandchildren and the daughter. And I'm like, who am I? For God's sake, I'm a dermatologist, but, fine, let me talk to him. So I listened to him. He was very bright, very intelligent guy. I was impressed how he was listening and how he was sharing the information. No, not like an ego. Most of the people like in big places like Mount Sinai, they suffer with an ego issue. Maybe that's why they stay there, because usually the pay in those things are low and you have less control. So that's how they exert their power, because some people are, reducing their power. So perhaps that's how they are feeling better about some of their own powers being inhibited. Yeah, whatever is the reason, it's something that we should try to avoid. Remain humble. And this guy was very humble and nice. And then we were talking, and I asked him, well, it would be nice if you also had hyperbaric, because they didn't want him to be intubated, and they also didn't want him to get remdesivir and some other stuff. Anyway, I did tell them to do take, in his situation, he was in the ICU. He did have the vaccine, by the way, but he was in the ICU. I don't know if he was updated on the vaccine, but he was in the ICU, meaning he took the 3 vaccines or 2 vaccines. And he was on CPAP, so he was on positive pressure, and he couldn't take any pills because he was constantly hyperventilating. And they were saying, eventually they may need to intubate him. And we were trying to avoid that. So what we were talking about is what we can do. So I said, did you give him did you check the type of virus? Yeah. And he says no. And I was like, why? So apparently you're not allowed to check the virus unless it's a study. And in Florida, you can, which is probably one of the smarter and freer states. You can call the health department and ask them to check what kind of virus the person is suffering from. I mean, the Delta or anything else. So the way they treat is they give the type of immunoglobulin based on the symptoms that the person has, expecting this to be the type of COVID, and hopefully this immunoglobulin will be attacking it, will be helpful to fight it. And I said, it will be more effective if you knew what you're fighting, and then you directly, fight it, as opposed to generally by the symptoms. This is not the best way to treat things. To which he said, yeah, I agree. And it's sad that government that doesn't understand medicine regulates what doctors can do. And trust me, it's not about saving money. It's actually wasting money if you're spending a lot of money doing the infusion for something that is incorrect. And then I said to him, well, what about doing it again if he needs to? It's like, yes, we actually do that. And I remember when I said it before, it's like, no, it's only one time. You can do it more than once. It's nonsense. Of course you can do it more than one time. It's not like you're developing antibodies to these immunoglobulins. Why you don't develop it? Because it's a human form of immunoglobulin. It's not like you do with the treatment that in the past used to be done, where if you would get like a snake bite, you would give anti-serum from horses, so you can only do it one time. If you give it a second time, you would get an attack to those immunoglobulin and you will die from it, right? So I continued talking to him, said, well, in December of 2021, there was an article that came out from Brazil that showed that JAK inhibitors were more effective even than the immunoglobulin therapy. And he says, yes, and we're actually using it. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. So can you give it? He says, yes, we are going to give it to him. And guess what? He was given the JAK inhibitors. And in 24 hours, he was out of the ICU, breathing on his own, and he's alive and well. I was not upset at the famous doctor from Mount Sinai who said that I'm a charlatan. He didn't know me, and he was having the best intentions for his patient. And the phone was on speaker, you know. And that also, that's a different story. But it reminds me, people say, oh, Jews are very hard-minded. If it's Shabbat, they won't open the phone, they won't do stuff. It's not true, not true. The rule is, what's most important is life. And for life, you're able and you're allowed to, and you're asked to break any other rules. And when I go ahead and care for my patients, that's what I do. I mean, yes, I risk my license. I risk perhaps my own health. But, if you go into medicine without love for humans and trying to help them, then you're in it for the wrong reason. Anyway, have a beautiful day. And it's sometimes the science goes a little behind our intuition, and we get like the feelings that something will happen in advance, like writers who came up with ideas of the cell phones, talking watches before they were invented, or flying machines, or a war that would happen where Germany would attack Britain and the US from the air, and that was written way before that happened in World War One. Or submarines, what you've learned. Anyway, have a beautiful day, and be good, do good, and may good come your way. Stay healthy.